Okay, so this is on obesity and poverty and the relationship between the two. The United States finds itself in the midst of an obesity epidemic, as many new outlets and public agencies have proclaimed. For good reason, researchers and public health experts are especially concerned about obesity among children and adolescents. Over the last 3 decades, obesity has grown almost threefold among youngsters. Obesity is a risk for all groups of Americans, but what is often left unsaid is the special vulnerability of the most disadvantaged groups. Obesity is especially rampant among Americans with the lowest levels of education and the highest poverty rates. Given the increasing economic insecurity facing many of our nations today, it is important to understand why and how poverty heightens the risk of obesity among youth. Only if we understand the cause at work can we effectively design strategies to reduce this major health risk to already vulnerable people. So this graph just shows how it's steadily, with obesity rate percentage and poverty, the relationship and how, well, the higher the poverty rate, the higher the obesity, which is why the line is showing it's all over the place, but the red line shows it is still going up. So why the risk of obesity is greater for the poor. Eating right and engaging in regular physical activity are decisions all individuals in America can make to lower the risk of obesity and associated health problems. But of course, the choices made by children and adolescents are strongly affected by the family and community environments in which they live. Improvised living conditions matter especially for the youth because they throw up many barriers to engaging in healthy behaviors. Poor families have limited food budgets and choices, and most often stretch supplies toward the end of the month before another check or allocation of food stamps arrives. This leads to unhealthy behaviors in several ways. Families choose high-fat foods with dense energy foods such as sugar, cereals, potatoes, and processed meat products because these foods are more affordable and last longer than fresh vegetables and fruit and lean meats and fish. Poor families often live in disadvantaged neighborhoods where healthy foods are hard to find. Instead of large supermarkets, poor neighborhoods have a disproportionate number of fast food chains and small food stores providing cheap, high-fat foods. There's also economic insecurity, such as trouble paying bills or rent, which leads to stress, and people often cope by eating high-fat, sugary foods. Even here in Bangor, Maine, for example, there is a lot of supermarkets and places to get food, but there's also fast foods everywhere, and the places that have more affordable food is mainly the high-fat stuff. Options for regular physical activity can also be restricted for poor people. Families cannot usually afford to pay for organized children's activities outside of school, and schools' improvised areas are less likely to run sports and physical activity programs than schools with more resources. Due to inflexible work schedules, lack of transportation, or unmet needs for childcare, poor parents, especially single mothers, may find it hard to support extra activities for their children. Leaving kids in front of the TV is often all stress poor parents can manage. In many poor neighborhoods, parks, playgrounds, trails, and free public gyms are often not available or safe. Neighborhoods may be crime-ridden, and there may be no nearby indoor places for play or exercise. Ironically, parental efforts to keep kids safe and indoors may encourage sedentary behaviors such as watching TV and playing video games. So I actually have a picture here from 2nd Street Park. It's in an area that is more disadvantaged because a lot of people in there are restricted incomes and stuff like that. But because of some of the crime that happens there, and some of the people that like to hang out on the other side of the park, it's not necessarily the safest place to go let your kids play. The long-term downside of youthful obesity. Compared to those who are not poor, adolescents in improvised families and communities are more likely to be obese or become overweight in young adulthood. And obesity in young children is not usually temporary. It's kind of a lifelong sentence. to ill health and socioeconomic disadvantages. Obese young adults are at risk for ongoing health problems such as cardiovascular disease, depression, and certain cancers. Being overweight in young adulthood is associated with unemployment, limits on educational attainment, and lower levels of income. Because the bad consequences are long-lasting and recurrent, obesity needs to be prevented and reversed for poor youngsters. Policymakers are looking for the best ways to do that. So this is just an image of some of the things that you will see with somebody who is overweight. So their lungs, they may have sleep apnea and asthma, liver. There'll be a lot of fat in the liver, kidneys disease, hips, hip pain with limb, knees, arthritis and joint pain, legs, pain with bowed legs, feet, flat feet, reproductive, irregular menstrual periods, or ovarian syndrome, back, lower back pain, pancreas, type 2 diabetes, stomach, GERD or acid reflux disease, heart disease, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and for head, poor self-esteem, depression, headaches, increased pressure in the brain. These can happen for adults and kids. So what can be done? To effectively prevent and reverse obesity among especially vulnerable poor people, we have to think of the issues in more than just individual terms. We must look for ways to begin to improve the social and physical environments in which low-income people live. Intervention in neighborhoods and community institutions can make a difference. For example, New York City is sponsoring a Green Cart program that uses mobile food carts to offer fresh produce in certain poor neighborhoods. New neighborhood resources are also needed to help connect people with one another, and a safe, organized activities conducted to good physical and mental health. School and Head Start programs can be key players too. Because youngsters spend so much time in them and they are valuable community institutions, research shows that incorporating physical activity and good nutrition into schools and preschool offerings can make a real difference in the fight against childhood and youth obesity. Investing in a diverse set of physical activities and nutritional programs in neighborhoods and educational institutions may be the best way to reduce the risk of obesity among poor youngsters. But such efforts need reliable funding from governments and charities to boost and leverage valuable programs in neighborhood centers and schools serving disadvantaged Americans. So that's all I have on this topic. Thank you for listening.